Are you the one, struggling with negative thoughts in your head that wake you up at 3 a.m.? Are you the one, trying to shut up that voice with medications or drugs to no avail, maybe even having an addiction now? Are you the one, that is under the control of your fear alter ego? Well, if that's the case, then sit back, tune in, and listen up to Shut Up, Stop Talking to Me, a podcast by Dr. Chris Allen Shreve, PhD. This is an in-depth clinical expose into the mind of trauma and the negative voice. Stay tuned.
Hello and welcome back. I'm Renisha Mullen. I'm here again with Dr. Chris Allen Shreve, mental health practitioner and traumatologist. We're again talking about his book, Shut Up, Stop Talking to Me, and we're on to our next set of egos, the alter ego model we've been talking about. And today we're talking about homicide and suicide, right?
Yes, we are. And we're delighted to have a guest in our studio today to talk about his story. And so I just want to remind our viewers again what this is all about. So the podcast are really in conjunction with this book that I've been working on for, as Johnny and I were talking way too long, about 4 years. He's like, yeah, I remember you talking about that book 4 years ago. And I'm like, well, all right, it's done now. So we're here talking about this book, and the theory of the book is really talking about the negative voice in our head, and the title of the book is called
Shut Up, Stop Talking to Me.
All right now. And so I thought it was a catchy title, and I'm working on a secondary title too, like The Battle of the Two Minds, or the Battle of the Negative Voice, or something that kind of really encapsulate what this book is really about. But it's really about what I think we all kind of struggle with from time to time, and that's that overactivation of fear and worry and feelings of being under some type of attack. And I think in my theory of this book, it kind of activates these trauma circuits, the fight or flight responses, and then, from that fight or flight, I think people start to morph into a different persona, then another voice emerges sometimes with a different content. And I think the voice part is really what this book is really about. And, and I think what happens with what I've discovered is that people are still hearing their same voice tone, but the content has changed.
Okay. Negative, right?
Right. Negative. Nasty, attacking, fear, inducing, attacking the self, minimizing your world, trying to predict your future to be bad, negative, and not going to happen. It also focuses on the past, all your failures and all of that. So this voice thing is what I kind of realized after working with thousands and thousands of patients and being trained very clinically to look at diagnoses like depression, anxiety, and all that. What I realized is that after about the 500th person literally said, if I could just turn this thing off in my head, I would be fine. Okay. And I was like, you're about the 500th person that told me that. So I said, well, what do you hear? And so that's what led to this whole thing. I started asking people, what do they hear? And so they were hearing this negative content that still had their voice tone, but the content shifted, and it seemed to activate their fight or flight circuit. So what I realized is that patients were coming into my office in stages of fight or flight. So there's fight, flight, freeze, and then there's fornicate. And the fornication one, we'll talk about that because we'll have a patient come in talking about their journey with hypersexualization. But that's another thing that happens when people are dealing with trauma. Mm-hmm. So today's topic was really a discovery of a very unique alter ego type. And I think a lot of people struggle with this type, though. And I think it's that voice of suicide and homicide. And I would read that homicide and suicide kind of walk and talk together sometimes. I didn't quite get that at first, but Johnny helped me understand that,
okay.
And so Johnny came in, and we'll let Johnny kind of tell the story. I'm going to have you introduce Johnny to us, go right ahead.
All right, so talking about voices, as you mentioned, we have a special guest. Johnny's here today. Johnny, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
How'd you and Dr. Shreve meet?
Yeah, so I was seeing someone at OPA, and it just wasn't working out. And I reached out and said, to my current, counselor that I was seeing, I just, the travel time, the techniques, the experience, I don't think it's working out. So, I reached back out to the office. I got put in touch with Shreve, and
he's the only person that can call me Shreve.
Okay.
oh yeah.
That's all right, man. You were with me before I was a doctor, so you're good. You're good.
And
it's refreshing.
And I remember our first session. I walked in, and I don't think there was anyone in the office. It was just him, and he brought me back to the very last office, and he sat me down. I was so intimidated. I've never been in a setting like this, and he basically was just, so what's going on? What's wrong with you? And at this point, I just, I had no idea, and so I'll really never forget that first time I ever met Shreve. I was like, I don't know about this guy. He seems way too excited for me. I was at
that energy.
Point. Yeah,
Right,
and reading on his website, he talked about an energy coach, and I was like, this guy's gonna bother me, but no, I mean, it's been the complete opposite. I mean, it's been it's crazy to actually be sitting here. I never thought I would get to a point where I felt like not recovered, but that I could come on, to a podcast and talk about this, and not get triggered, and so I definitely owe that to him for sure.
Yeah, well, I think Johnny, to be honest with you, you probably have taught me more than I think I might have taught you. I think we were learning this as I was figuring this out, and I knew enough. I think when you came in to kind of throw you the framing of this model, this theory, and then I think as we continued on, we were learning how to get you better, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, coming and seeing you and him telling me, about this program or this virus that was in my, my mind, it wasn't something that ever, I guess, clicked. I was hearing what I wanted to hear. I wasn't, and I was just accepting it. I was.
And when you mean accepting the negative voice as something you had to live with, right?
Yeah, it was just, it was tough, and just being told, I'm not good enough, or just, I just felt like, I wasn't supposed to be here. Things were going on in my life at that time that were strange. I would, me and my fiance lived in this house that we weren't, we were proud of, but it was small, and I had a job where I was working, after hours and stuck in my house, and I think it was just a culmination of all of that. Just a lot of, like I like to bring up to him, is just a lot of why. Why am I in this situation, or why was I put here? Why do I deserve this? So, once I was able to figure that out, a lot of our sessions and my understanding of the whole program kind of really took off, and that's kind of where it kind of basically exploded, with my understanding, and just kind of being able to, grab a hold of it, and, focus on some of the, basically some of the things that we had talked about with the program are just, shutting it down, ways that I can do that, and some of the ways that I focused on that were, the music that I listened to. Basically I turned it into a routine. So I would listen to the same music in the morning. I would listen to the same music, on my way home. So I was getting to this routine. I was meditating at night. And, so basically it was just, I stopped asking why, got into a routine. And from there, it really just kind of took off, and I was able to, just kind of figure it out.
Okay. So you go in there, you meet him, and you guys discover this alter ego model, and he tells you, oh, that's not you. What's your first thought?
I know mine was crazy.
Like me.
I asked the question, I thought it was crazy. So what did you think?
Yeah, I guess I had never really thought, I never really had anyone, tell me that, so I didn't know, what, I didn't know what to think, when he said, this voice, speaking to you. I was just like, I know I can hear this. Is it me talking to myself? Is this actually an alter ego? What's going on? So there was a lot of back and forth with, am I kind of starting to, go crazy a little bit, or is this really a program that's talking to me, and I'm fighting my way back off of it. So it took a long time to kind of differentiate, if it was, basically what would happen is I would get triggered, and this, not voice, but this, program would start up in my mind, almost like, gears turning on. It was like my brain was almost made of gears, and this program was turning it on, and
like a switch hit.
Yeah, and I just wasn't able to turn it off, and it was so powerful in the beginning because I had no tools. And when I first started seeing you, I basically accepted, defeat. I was like, I'm going to be living with this voice for the rest of my life. My brain doesn't shut off. I'm never going to be able to sleep again. And, so it was...
And we said, oh, no, that's not going to be the case.
So, I mean, having someone tell you that, or, ask you, it's kind of eye-opening because, you don't really know either. I was depressed.
Got suicidal, I think, at some points. You were bouncing in and out of the suicide a little bit, too.
100%. So, I mean, it was just powerful,
For our readers, just and our viewers and listeners, I mean, we're broadcasting this a bunch of different ways. Give them an identity of what the identity that your alter ego had. What was it? The content. What is it that actually drove you into the office? What were you hearing? I guess.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've always been into heavy metal music and things like that, and tattoos, and so I kind of turned myself into what I liked. So. For the longest time, there was no, really no problem with it. And then, it kind of goes back to the why. I'll never really know or understand why, all this kind of happened. But,
yeah, we never really did get to the core of how the voice got turned on. Yeah, we just focused on turning it off. But, yeah.
It was like someone told me or diagnosed me with OCD, and I kind of really took that to heart. And it was like all this repetitive nature, all this stuff that I've done in my life, before, growing up, tapping on my feet and counting letters and words like that. It was just kind of like it all led up to where I was. And basically what had happened was I started to, instead of obsessing over, small, mundane things, I was obsessing over, rumination, or I guess, graphic imagery. A lot of the, the heavy metal music, or, a lot of the horror movies and stuff that I was into. I mean, that's everything it portrays. So, for me to first have to deal with that, it was like an identity crisis almost, because it was like I can't even deal with the things I like. So, listening to heavy metal music or watching horror movies or things like that, it was turning on. It was basically just turning on, you
kind of created an identity of that, of all of that
imagery in my brain of just,
doom and gloom, and
scenes that I'd seen, from movies or in music videos of just, there's one scene in particular that sticks out on an old HBO show, and I think I brought this up to you, where it's just for the longest time that clip just played over and over in my head of this guy just swinging an axe up in between this guy's legs. And no matter what I was doing, I could just be working or hanging out with family or whatever, my brain was not turning off, and it was just had all this violent imagery in it. And for some reason, that image stuck in my mind forever. And it eventually led to other things, and I would just, I don't want to get too graphic here, but I would literally just be walking around shopping at a grocery store, and I would just see imagery of beheadings and suicides and people falling off buildings and just insane things that the everyday person doesn't have to deal with. And so once that started happening, and I wasn't able to kind of rationalize it, that's kind of when this whole program kind of took over, because it turned into why. And basically the word why kind of ruined my life for a few years.
Because you couldn't figure it out.
I couldn't figure it out. I had had a great upbringing. I had both my parents still. I had gone to college, and, you know, I had a nice job. I'd really never dealt with any sort of adversity in my life. Me and Shreve kind of go back and forth as like, where's this trauma that this is, that triggered this? And we still haven't found it. Maybe we'll never find it. But
because sometimes it's unconscious, it gets buried in the subconscious, unconscious realm, and it still has a triggering effect, even though we don't know what the source of it is. Sometimes.
So I mean, it was just a lot of questioning myself. Am I in the right relationship? Am I in the right career? Am I in the job that I need to be in right now? And I'm like, is this what's causing all of this? And instead of, I guess, trying to fix anything, I just kind of shut down.
Yeah.
And accepted it.
Right. And got depressed.
Yeah, and it basically shut me down, and it basically led me to kind of forget who I was.
Right.
As far as from just like a happiness standpoint, remembering things that I would do.
Yeah, your authentic self, right?
In the car, just randomly screaming to like scare my wife, or things like that. It was just like I was always on edge.
Right.
My brain was always going.
Yes.
I was always thinking about violent imagery, no matter what I did, and I just couldn't figure it out because it was just, there's nothing in my life that really ever triggered anything like this. It was just like such an unknown.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't even so much the violent imagery that, scared me. It was the why.
Mm-hmm.
And literally the list of why ran so long, it just spiraled me out.
Yeah, yeah,
and, and I mean, still to this day, sometimes I was talking to Shreve, I kind of had like a mini episode or a mini trigger, earlier this week, and I was nervous about, potentially, having to come on here and talk about it, but no, I mean.
But that also demonstrates your ability to win the game. We can talk about the tool, but so now I think what you're realizing is like it's not a perfect world, and you have a powerful tool that can shut this down and keep you in your authentic self is kind of how I put it.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, once you figure out, or once you, like, I guess, basically what I do now is I kind of like mind control the alter ego, like a puppet, I'm like its puppet master at this point.
Nice.
Like I can literally, and we've had sessions where like it happens, and like I'll get a trigger, or like we've talked about, like sometimes like I get these weird brain zaps, and then the trigger, it's like the gears start turning.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there's been times where I've laughed in its face, or we talk about getting the bad out,
right?
Being it down.
Right.
So I mean, once you're able to really, once I was able to get away from that questioning everything and wondering why, and just kind of, I guess, not accepting it, but just taking it for what it's worth. And I don't know. Once you get put in that, once you feel like you're in control of it,
right?
It's a huge milestone.
Right.
It just, you can trigger, and then you can basically deal with it, and then you can move on. And it wasn't shutting me down for a month at a time, and causing me to call into work and miss other life events.
The fight, flight, freeze. The freezing, staying in bed, not going out the house, not going to work. Right.
And and through my whole, I guess, journey, you could say, I've reached all of those. You know what I mean? I flew, I froze, I've done it all. So
and in probably one day, it can happen all in one day.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
I definitely ran the gamut of emotions.
Yeah. Wow. It's interesting. So, like when we first met, and you were talking to me about what was going on with you and what you were hearing, and I was, and then I say, well, at first, honestly, I mean, because I was just still figuring this out. I was like, well, I always take a patient on, but I don't always know what to do with them, sometimes. And so when we were talking, I was like, wow, what's going on with you, with this guy, and so then I finally said, well, you know what, it doesn't really matter, because we were searching, trying to find, well, where does this come from, and then I realized, like, well, it doesn't matter, we just need to shut it off. And so
why again? It was always that word,
Yeah. And so I think then we went to, like, talking about the identity crisis, which I really appreciate you bringing that in, because that's what really happens. I think people lose sight of their authentic self, and then they go into this fight or flight persona, and then they adopt that as their new personality.
Yeah, and you're just a zombie.
Right.
You're a zombie all day.
Well, you're drawn to the virus at that point.
It has control of you. Like, you can tell when you're different, when you're running on the program.
Exactly.
I mean, you have no emotion. People ask you, I mean, are you okay? Like, it's just, when the program has a control of me, like, it's on my face. Like, you can see it plain as day.
Sure. I would see it in the office when you would come in, because you know, and I'm respectful of your alter ego. We have a name for him, but we're not going to use it on air. But it's the MF. We call him the MF. And when you would come in, you were a little afraid of this guy.
Yeah, I mean...
Yeah. He's a scary dude in your head. Right.
What would happen...
Yeah, go ahead.
I would walk in, and Shreve would be like, I'm not talking to Johnny. This is the program talking to me right now.
Yeah.
I mean, there were a few times, and still to this day, you know, Shreve, I'm feeling good. Let's cancel the appointment. There were a couple of times I
you did.
But there were a couple of times I couldn't wait to get
you owe
into
me some
that
no-show
office.
fees, by the way. But go ahead.
But, I mean,
That's not a joke.
I
No.
mean, just,
Go ahead.
oh, man. But,
Yeah.
no, I mean, it was just, I remember walking in there, and he would just call it out.
Yeah.
He would
You
do
can
it
see it
just-
in your face.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
he would just know it. And I would just be like, this guy is right. I am not on it. You're talking to the virus right now. I am spiraling out of control. I can, I'm staring at you. I am dealing with negative thoughts, negative emotions. There's no sort of positivity in my mind. Like, I am listening to you, but like...
The program's overriding. It's just
the program is 100% on right now.
Loud. Right.
This is literally not doing anything, probably. And it took a long time to pull myself out of that. But that first time you said, something along the lines of, it sounds like, well, what would happen basically, I think. And I don't think you would say, this is the program talking. I think I would say things. I would, make references, and you would call it out.
Yeah, well, it's real easy
that
for
doesn't
me.
sound
Right.
like you.
Well,
Like,
yeah.
That's the MF talking.
Right.
And,
Right.
and it's weird when you realize it.
Yeah.
It's like the light bulb goes off in your mind, and you're like, oh yeah.
That is him talking about it. Yeah, that's not me talking, right?
And it's like, but it's like when you're in that triggered state of mind, you have no idea.
There you go.
It blows right over your mind.
There you go.
Right over your head.
Right.
And you just, and
they're in that cycle.
yeah,
You get triggered, and we figured out at least your triggers are stress
oh yeah,
and change.
oh yeah.
Right. So
100%.
whenever that kind of happens, or change and uncertainty, or just sudden change,
Yeah, I mean, it's just basically what the program does, and like Shree brought up the uncertainty. It's like it can see when I'm kind of like, when I have my guard down, and it's like, still to this day it'll try to jump in, like it kind of has this week almost, and but just having that tool, knowing that, it's just it's just a program. Everyone's got one. Yeah, you just have to kind of
tell it to shut up, stop talking to
figure
me.
it out.
Title
It's
of my book.
I think we had talked about it. Everyone has a program running. Some people have to get like this virus and software installed, and
Yeah.
and this is kind of an analogy for this
You got to quarantine
Well,
that
we did,
voice.
you
You
know.
got to corral and quarantine the voice.
Yeah.
But I think that the whole thing is you have to know you have the voice,
Yeah.
and that the voice is not your authentic self.
Yeah.
That to me is the discovery.
Yeah, no. Once you realize that you're more powerful than the program, it takes on a whole new meaning. I mean, you can still wake up and go on with your day to day, and just good.
So you mentioned that it was weird hearing it for the first time described this way, right? And now that you know about it, you've got some experience with it. How do you share this with other people?
Yeah, no. I mean, it's a great question, because when all this was going on, it wasn't something I could share. I feel like harming myself, or I feel like, I feel like harming my wife, and I know we haven't really like touched a whole lot on that, but
Yeah.
a lot of these negative, thoughts I was having, they were directed, at me and my wife. We were the only ones, in the house at the time, and I just couldn't figure it out. And I think that's ultimately, why it just put me in such a depressive state of mind.
Right.
It was the person that I love, the person that I'm with every day.
Who you love madly, right?
I've been
Right.
with-
Like,
I've
why
been
do I
with this
want
person
to
for
kill my
years.
wife? Right.
And it's like, where does this, where did this come from? And then so it just kind of went back to that why.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And then that would trigger your depression, and
Yeah.
that would trigger your suicidal
Yeah.
thoughts. Because you were so like, why in the world why I don't want to kill my wife. I love my wife, And so I think that triggered that suicidal side.
yeah, that's exactly what happened. Is like I would get a trigger, and it would be homicidal thoughts, and then it would turn into just such a low feeling, and then it would turn into like that suicidal, just ideas.
Yeah.
Never any sort of, follow through, but just the idea in your mind is enough.
Yeah.
To kind of
Right.
make you feel like you've hit rock bottom.
Right.
Especially when it's, she was my wife at the time, but she was, my fiance, and I have to see her every day, and but to get back to your question, to bring it up to her for the first time was insane. I just, I don't know if I can exactly like remember, everything I said word for word, but it was an interesting conversation to have. I'm having, I think I'm depressed. I think is how I told her, is how I brought it on. I think I'm depressed. I'm not happy. We had like a wedding coming up. I was feeling like very nervous. Am I doing the right thing? Is this what I want?
That why again.
Just a lot of life changes and a lot of why. Why am I in all these different situations? And but the biggest why is like, why is this trigger on right now during all of this that's happening in my life right now?
Right.
So,
And then why is my wife the target? Right. Yeah.
And so it would just be so upsetting. It would just,
Yeah.
I would just break down.
Yeah,
I would just break down and
yeah.
cry, as, 28, 29-year-old, guy is just crying over, these pointless negative thoughts about me and my wife. And ultimately what it did is made me kind of just change a lot about my life. A lot of things that I used to watch and, read about, I don't pay attention to that anymore.
Like filtering your mind, trying to guard what you allow into your mind now.
100%.
Yeah.
So I mean, some people will probably, look at this and say, the program still has a hold of them. He can't watch like any sort of murder documentary or anything like that. But at the same time, it's like I don't need that in my life anymore.
Well, right.
I don't. That's not my interest.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
No value add there.
Yeah, there's no sort of value add anymore. I've grown out of that. I've realized that I'm not that person. It's just not something that's going to be a part of my life anymore. And once again, once I got over the why, because going back, it's like an identity thing. It's like I can't even be myself anymore. I can't watch the things I want to watch because I'm going to get triggered. And so it's just, it was a lot of time spent, trying to figure that out. But, having to tell my wife for the first time that, I was depressed and suicidal and homicidal and feeling like I didn't know if I wanted to be in a relationship. And, it's tough. She's always been supportive, but I think the one thing that you have to realize is that no one really understands but you. I mean, you can tell someone I'm having these thoughts, but like no one can understand that your brain is constantly moving and going for 24 hours about negative thoughts, and negative imagery. So like I could tell my wife, hey, I feel suicidal, and it's just, they can help out so much, but it was just,
So you were trapped in your own story.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to be honest with you, when you first came in, you were reluctant to really tell me, too.
Yeah, it's just so, it's not embarrassing, but it's upsetting,
Yeah.
I've never...
And you think you get judged and or hospitalized. Because if you went to the wrong person, like a psychiatrist, and told them all this was going on, they would have likely maybe thought about putting you in the hospital and putting you on several different kind of medications.
Yeah, no,
for
and
that.
I mean, there were times when, before I started seeing Shreve, I saw another counselor, and there were a few sessions where, she had actually brought that question up, if she needed to call, 911 or.
Until I figured it out, I wasn't sure either if it was schizophrenia or I didn't really know what was going on with you really in the beginning.
Yeah, when all of this happened, I mean, because I go back and I try to ask my dad and, things, what runs in our family and things along those lines. And it just seems so far-fetched because it's like no one thinks that's going to happen to them.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And then your brain, grabs a hold of that idea and it can send you down a dark path.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm schizophrenic. I'm going to do something when I'm, 40 or my life, and it's just, it can put you in a dark state of mind and it can put you basically where you just, I didn't want to know what was going to happen tomorrow because I really didn't want tomorrow to come. I didn't want to have to wake up.
Right.
And just, there would just be months where I just wake up and my mind was going, and it was just, it wasn't like, kill, or anything like that, but it was just like, it was just another day where I knew my brain was going to be going nonstop and just have all this violent imagery and, me questioning why and.
Wow. Man, I'm almost getting emotional here hearing your story because, I know I've been helping you, but I didn't know you were struggling like that, and I'm just glad that this has helped you.
Oh, it would be tough to kind of understand or, I guess, how much I appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate you helping me teach me more and then, helping me to get this book out and coming to do this podcast and, and I think it's going to help a lot of people. And I really appreciate your courage to come and talk about this topic and, really helping people understand and they don't have to hide from this. They don't have to run from that negative thought and they can beat it. They can fight it. Yeah.
If I can beat it, literally anyone can beat it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I probably shouldn't say this, but I am as weak-minded as they come. I am pessimistic. When something goes bad, it's going to be the worst day. So,
but again, see, I would argue that is the framing of the altar, though.
Yeah, 100%.
Right, see?
And also to kind of go back, it's like I'm also kind of in that state of mind right now. But I think just because I've been, we've been talking for so long and going through, sessions and, different strategies, I can sit here, have those thoughts and ideas, and, it doesn't stress me out.
There you go.
I have the tools that I need to, to take care of it.
To go kick some ass.
100%.
Right? Ass kicking mode.
Dr. Shree, can you tell us a little bit about the tools that you equipped Johnny with?
Woo, yeah, wow. And you're like, he's just a little weepy boy here. No, I'm very touched by your story.
Yeah.
I know we were doing this journey, but to rehear it again and then to see how you're just doing so much better, man, it's very touching. Well, the tools are really, awareness. I think he would come in periodically just for tune-ups.
Oh, yeah.
That's kind of what I would call it, like a checkup. Because I think what would happen, you would get triggered, and I would call it like you would forget what we talked about, and then you would come in, and I would tell you all over again. And then, because actually the podcast idea really came from our sessions because you taught me that if you forget the theory, you go back to the alter ego.
Oh yeah, it takes right over.
Takes right over. Right.
Yeah, as soon as you stop with your day to day.
Yeah.
With everything that I was doing, we would talk, and it was like the next day I would fall out of it, and I'm like, what am I doing? And so yeah, once you have that tool of knowing how to handle it, and that why goes out the window, it just makes a world of difference.
Yeah,
and it's not so much that I've accepted it. It's just I've learned how to combat it.
Yeah.
And I've learned that, everyone has one of these. Mine's just,
They all have different characteristics. That's why we're doing all these podcasts, because we're talking about the individual character types of these alter egos.
Right.
And yours is kind of like the homicidal, suicidal one.
Yeah.
Right. And you have really educated our listeners and viewers about this topic in a much more profound way than I think has ever been discussed. And I think that, the tune-ups and coming in and getting that refresher, because I even said to you, I said, well, maybe I'll just videotape me doing a session and just putting on the video on the website so you can just go in there and look at it to remind yourself, I'm not the voice in my head. I have one. It's not me, and I'm not him. And that's, getting back to your question about techniques, that's it. I control my mind. My mind doesn't control me. I have an alter ego, and it's not me. And as long as you keep that awareness, it doesn't matter what they say. It's all a lie. And so we just don't listen to it, no matter what it says, because it's not my true voice talking to me. And I think that's really the breakthrough in this motto. We were deceived into thinking that inner voice is our authentic voice talking to us about the truth of our life. That is what I now call mental illness. And when you can come out from underneath that identity that I've been living in this altered identity, then you can go find your authentic self, and then you get better. And that's what you were doing. You were bouncing out. When you can laugh at your altar, you have gotten better.
100%. And like you said, it's the awareness.
Right.
Once the awareness strikes, that's when
you bounce out. You just come right back out. Yeah.
Because then you
like, oh, yeah, not me, it's him.
It's not
talking
real.
again.
Yeah,
right.
100%. It's just, but that awareness is just what took so long. Yeah. It took so long to take over for that word why.
Right.
But as soon as I was aware. I mean, as soon as he told me, you have to be aware, and I was able to go home and really think about that. That's when you can really take it over.
Mm-hmm.
Like that it's there. You're not letting it make you nervous. You almost feel like I felt like a sense of urgency. I was like, I need him to get out of here now. I was like, and we were like, get the bat.
Right.
We're going out back.
Right.
And
right.
Yeah,
and before we wrap, can you share because she asked a question about techniques, and I didn't want to tell your story, but tell her what you told me, actually what you would do when you get triggered. What would you actually do?
Kind of going back on the metal music, and kind of my whole identity is before COVID. Let's start before COVID. I had a more daily routine of going to the office.
Mm-hmm.
There were months where I was triggered, and I would have to go to work, and there was just no way out of it. I wasn't working at home. I had to deal with it. I had to see people every single day and somehow deal with this. And how I knew I won is I was able to kind of go back to the music, and I had actually made a playlist that I would listen to every morning, and that was just kind of like the kick-ass playlist of the day. We're getting the bat out.
We're
getting the bat. We're driving. It's full blast. I know every word of every song.
Right.
It was just a motivational thing. It was once I was able to pull myself out of that that darkness and figure out something that made me happy.
Right.
It changes a lot. For 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And then it might come back on. But for 30 minutes, I know I can manage it. Mm-hmm. So that means, if I keep doing this, if I keep at it, 30 minutes is going to turn into an hour.
That's right.
It's going to be 4 hours.
That's right.
16 hours.
And then it's a lifestyle.
And then it's, and then it's a lifestyle.
And, neurologically, and I didn't write the book to be very neuroscience driven, but a lot of this is neuroscience, because once you start developing the positive thoughts, you start living in the positive mindset, your brain helps you to dismantle that negative voice. 100%. That's the neuroscience. That'll probably be another kind of a book that I write. I didn't want to make this one real technical, but that's the neuroscience behind this. That's why eventually positive thoughts help to dismantle the negative thought network. So the more you keep practicing that technique and battling your alter ego and going to war and positive affirmations and meditation and exercise and all of that, that's how we neurologically dismantle this neural network that houses this negative voice. Right. So it's actually neuroscience.
It's incredible. Really how you're able to, I guess the general idea is so simple,
right?
But when you look at it, it's much more complicated. Yeah. But I feel like we were able to kind of simplify, my situation.
Yeah.
Dumb it down to a point where something that I could battle every day if I needed to.
Yeah, and kick ass, right?
Right. It was just what was so good about just the whole being aware and kind of what we established as kind of my little daily routine.
Mm-hmm.
It was just,
that's right.
It was nice to find that.
Well, sure. Man, great story. Great story. Wow.
Really happy for you.
Thanks.
Wow.
So
I guess we're going to wrap it up here. Yeah. So yeah.
What's next?
Well, as I said, the book is going to be out pretty soon. And finally, I cut an editing publishing deal Wednesday.
Okay.
And so we're going to be back and forth getting a draft together. So I figure by July, I'll have a digital copy. In August, I'll have hardback copies. So for all of our viewers and listeners, stand by with your $20, $25 donation.
Right, Johnny, how long has this been in the making?
Right. So too long. But you know what? It's the proper timing because I think what happened, I was still learning what we were still learning. And I think I got to a point where I think I learned enough to be able to write about it.
Okay.
And then I appreciate Johnny coming in and telling his story. Really, each week it seems like this gets richer and richer as we've been doing these podcasts and unfolding this model, this theory of the alter ego and the negative voices in our head, and then rejecting them as not being part of self.
Yeah.
And I think as long as anybody can do that, you're going to have a good day.
100%. Yeah. Once you get that idea that you're not the only one dealing with the alter ego,
Right.
and that everyone has an alter ego. It's just how you have to manage it. It gets a lot easier.
Johnny, that's probably the most profound thing of all of this that I think I've heard in all of our podcasts is what you just said. Yeah. And we'll end it on that note.
Yeah, to more good days.
All right.
Sounds good. We'll be back soon, folks. Stay tuned for our next podcast.
You're gonna be great. It's gonna be alright.
Are you the one, struggling with negative thoughts in your head that wake you up at 3 a.m.? Are you the one, trying to shut up that voice with medications or drugs to no avail, maybe even having an addiction now? Are you the one, that is under the control of your fear alter ego? Well, if that's the case, then sit back, tune in, and listen up to Shut Up, Stop Talking to Me, a podcast by Dr. Chris Allen Shreve, PhD. This is an in-depth clinical expose into the mind of trauma and the negative voice. Stay tuned.